"Grandpa, tonight my parents are going to take all your money," whispered the voice of my 8-year-old granddaughter, and my heart nearly stopped. Those words hit like thunder, shattering the illusion of family loyalty I had believed in. I, a trusting grandfather, always ready to help my children, left the party early, trying to hide my shock behind a tired mask. But in my mind, a plan for revenge began to form, cunning, cold, and something the betrayers would never forget. Before we continue, if you want to see the story of a grandfather confronting betrayal by his own family and seeking justice, please like and subscribe so you don't miss it. That morning, the pale April sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, but my heart felt heavy as lead. Alexa, my only 8-year-old granddaughter, whispered in my ear, "Grandpa, tonight my parents will take all your money." I froze. 35 years of hard work, every penny I'd given to my family, and now even a child knew about a silent conspiracy closing in. I tried to stay calm, but my heart pounded wildly. Over the past 3 years, I had spent more than $70,000 on my son and daughter-in-law's expenses, from mortgage payments, car repairs, to Alexa's private school tuition. Every expense, every bill, every promise to help was made with an ironclad belief that my children would honor that love and gratitude properly. But now, it all felt like an elaborate deception. Immediately, I realized this was no ordinary worry of a loving grandfather. This was a calculated, meticulously planned scheme to seize everything I had saved my whole life. I took a deep breath. My eyes resting on the stick figure drawing Alexa made a crooked house. Family members standing side by side. Purple, blue, and red, mixed in a simple drawing holding an entire world. I left the kitchen, walked into the living room, sat down on the old leather chair, and looked outside. Harry, my son, had called at 7 in the morning. His voice was shaking, not the naive trembling of youth, but the tremble of someone hiding something. He tried to convince me to come to Alexa's birthday party, a party I'd never missed before. But today, the invitation came with a vague condition. "We want to discuss some family matters." I closed my eyes, recalling all the times Harry and Mary, my daughter-in-law, used every trick to convince me to give them money. 3 weeks ago, Mary stood right here in this kitchen, subtly reminding me that the house was too big, suggesting that a convenient neighborhood could help me relax. Those words now flashed like a warning signal. I sat down at the table, set my coffee cup down, and let the business instincts I honed over 40 years guide me. They had a plan, and I was going to beat them at their own game. First, I had to be certain about everything. I dug up financial documents, receipts, every expense for Harry, Mary, and Alexa. There were 247 transactions over the past 3 years, from mortgage payments, car repairs, medical costs, to private school tuition. Each expense had detailed notes, reasons, and dates. I wasn't just managing money, I was managing evidence of kindness and betrayal. After careful review, I made a list of steps to take, verify the legal situation, contact longtime friends in banking, prepare a plan to protect my granddaughter's assets and rights. The goal was clear: prevent my son and daughter-in-law from unlawfully taking the money I'd spent a lifetime accumulating, while ensuring Alexa wouldn't be harmed by adults' selfish schemes. Everything was meticulously prepared. I knew Harry and Mary would think I was just an old man easy to manipulate, but I was no longer the blind old man they knew. I am Norman, who built a career from an old truck, who has seen countless ups and downs and failures. And now, I will use that experience to protect what belongs to me and to Alexa. The phone vibrated. Harry called again. I answered calmly. "Tell me honestly what you plan to do." Harry was tongue-tied, trying to stay silent. I knew I was right. They intended to use legal procedures to seize the money. I smiled lightly. This game has just begun, and I'm the one in control. Before getting ready to leave the house for the party, I looked back at Alexa, the little girl playing near the gift table. I bent down and took her hand. Alexa, Grandpa promises to protect you. No matter what happens today, I will handle it. But for now, let's enjoy your birthday, okay? She nodded, her smile bright, the only light on a day darkened by betrayal. And from that moment, I was certain of one thing: today would be the day I paid back the betrayal smartly, meticulously, and in a way no one would ever forget. Exactly at 2 o'clock, I arrived at Harry's front door. The house was full of colors, balloons, and a happy birthday. Alexa banner stretched across the wall, but my heart was still racing. My eyes missed nothing. Harry and Mary greeted me with smiles too perfect, tones too cheerful. I knew those smiles were fake. Alexa ran over and wrapped her arms tightly around me. "Grandpa, you're the best in the whole world," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling like a sunlit lake. I took a deep breath, pushing my worries aside, and smiled back, but part of me stayed on guard. I'd heard what she said this morning. Harry and Mary's plan was waiting, and I had to watch closely. The party went on with games, birthday cake, and forced laughter from the guests. Harry kept steering every conversation away from money, while Mary skillfully arranged the food, seating me closest to Alexa. Everything went according to the script. They'd prepared a show where I was the manipulated audience. I watched every gesture, every glance. Harry checked his watch 3 times in 10 minutes. Mary subtly leaned in as if to remind her son of something. They coordinated perfectly with just looks and small gestures. I smirked. They forgot one detail: I'm no longer easy to fool. As everyone gradually withdrew, Harry whispered, "Dad, stay behind after the guests leave. We have something important to discuss." Mary nodded quickly, her voice sounding overly urgent. I smiled gently. Today is Alexa's birthday. Let's leave everything for tomorrow. But they remained determined. I understand. This is the moment they want to carry out the plan they've been preparing for a long time. After the guests left, I led Alexa into the living room and sat down beside her. "Grandpa will protect you. Alexa?" "Whatever happens tonight, I will handle it," I said firmly. She looked at me with eyes full of trust. I took a deep breath, deciding that, now, I would take the initiative. Harry and Mary entered, carrying a thick file. Mary handed over the file, her voice gentle. "Dad, we thought you might need help managing everything more easily. Finances, paperwork, medical decisions." I raised an eyebrow, looking at the file. Every word in it was a scheme, every page calculated in detail to seize control. I listened to their presentation, each word meticulously planned. Harry tried to emphasize concern. Mary acted kindly, all to make me believe I needed their help. But I was no longer the Norman I used to be. I had seen through the game. After pretending to think for a moment, I lifted my eyes to look directly at them. "I know what you're trying to do. These documents, all the procedures I've prepared to deal with them," I said calmly, but with authority. Harry and Mary were startled. Their eyes wide, they had never seen me so resolute. I opened the drawer and took out receipts, contracts, detailed reports of 247 transactions over 3 years. Every expense, every invoice, every support payment, all clearly recorded, verified, and enough evidence to prove their exploitation. I placed each paper on the table, my gaze never leaving them. Mary gasped. Harry trembled. I continued, "You tried to plan to control everything of mine, but you forgot that the law and evidence can work against you. Today, control is not in your hands." Alexa stood close to me, her eyes following every move, recognizing Grandpa's strength and determination. I wasn't just protecting money. but also her innocence and future. I placed my hand on the girl's shoulder. "Don't worry, I will secure your future." They realized their plan couldn't be carried out. Every trick, every calculation, every legal document, I saw right through them all. I stood up, my voice firm. Any action aimed at seizing my property or Alexa's rights will face legal consequences. This is the final warning. The girl smiled, her eyes shining with trust and love. I took a deep breath, knowing the battle had begun today, but I held the advantage. The birthday party ended, but it was only the prelude to a fair and determined plan to protect my real family. The next morning, sunlight danced through the office window, but inside me, everything was taut like a tightrope. I sat down at the desk, spreading out files, receipts, contracts, bank books, all the proof of every expense and support Harry and Mary relied on to plan their takeover. Each piece of paper was part of the story, evidence of exploitation, but also the key to reversing everything. I picked up the phone and called James Miller, a longtime friend, bank vice president, who understood how my investments and assets operated. "James, I need a detailed review of all investments and asset controls. Can it be ready by tomorrow?" I said, calm but determined. "Absolutely, Norman. We'll review everything, organize it properly, and ensure legal compliance," James replied. I felt reassured by his promise. Next, I contacted Catherine Davis, who had notarized most of my legal documents for years. She was not just a witness, but a legal shield against all of Harry and Mary's schemes. "Catherine, I need to make sure every document is notarized and legally complete by tomorrow. Everything must be ready. I cannot afford any mistakes." While waiting for James and Catherine's responses, I arranged a detailed plan for the afternoon. 9:45, my Catherine will arrive to prepare the notary. 10:00, James will come with investment files and the list of documents. 10:05, Harry and Mary will arrive, still believing I'm the easygoing grandpa they can fool. 10:15, all truths will be revealed. I carefully reorganized the files, marking every important detail. Every word, every number is a link in the plan I've been nurturing for a long time. 40 years of business, building assets, now all that experience has become my weapon. The doorbell rang. Catherine arrived on time, carrying the seal and the journal. Everything was ready. 10 minutes later, James walked in, files in hand, eyes burning with determination. Only Harry and Mary hadn't arrived yet. When they showed up, I greeted them calmly. "Please have a seat. Before signing any documents, we need to make sure everything is clear." Harry's eyes flickered, trying to hide his tension. Mary leaned in slightly, her tone still carefully gentle, but I noticed the unease in her gestures. I opened the files, placing each page before them detailed reports on 247 expenses over 3 years, from Alexa's tuition, car repairs, living costs, to every payment I had covered. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, my voice low but firm. Harry and Mary were silent, eyes wide, never having seen me so prepared and clear-headed. I continued, "You tried to figure out how to control me, but you forgot one thing. The law and evidence always stand on the side of truth. I'm prepared to protect myself and protect Alexa." Mary let out a soft sigh, forcing a smile, but Harry looked clearly stunned. I stared at them, my gaze cutting through their false confidence like a knife. "Any action to seize my assets or Alexa's rights will face legal consequences," I said. Alexa stood close to me, her eyes clear and full of trust. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Grandpa will protect you. Everything will be fine." She smiled. The trust in her eyes made me feel stronger. My plan wasn't just to stop Harry and Mary's ambitions. It was also a lesson about honesty, responsibility, and true love for family. Every paper, every receipt, every legal record, all prepared to strike back precisely when they felt the most confident. When everyone left, I stayed behind, feeling the peace within, knowing that the next step would decide who truly holds control, the exploiter or the protector of the family. I was ready. Monday morning, dawn not yet broken, but I was firmly seated at my office desk, facing all the legal files and documents. I had detailed the plan from personal assets, investments, to every receipt of Harry and Mary's expenses. Each piece of paper was a link in my strategy. At 9:45, Catherine Davis knocked, carrying the seal and the ledger. I nodded and glanced at James Miller, who arrived right on time with a complete set of bank documents. Everything was ready. Only two greedy people were about to walk into the trapeze. At 10 a.m., Harry and Mary appeared with bright faces but eyes full of worry. I smiled calmly. "Please, have a seat. Before signing anything, we need to make sure everything is clear and transparent." I opened the file, placing each page before them a detailed report of 200 features. 7 transactions over 3 years, from Alexa's tuition, car repairs, living expenses, to every financial support I provided. "Do you see anything?" I asked, voice low and firm. Harry and Mary were silent, eyes wide open. Mary tried to keep smiling, but her fake confidence was clearly fading. I continued, "You studied how to control me, prepared legal documents to seize assets. But you forgot one thing: the law stands with the truth." I put my hand on Alexa's shoulder, the little girl standing close to me with bright, trusting eyes. "I will protect you. Everything will be fine." That faith made me more determined than ever. Mary took a deep breath, her tone forced. "We just want to help Dad manage everything." "Help," I repeated coldly. "Your actions over the past 3 years have not been help. This is a plan to seize assets, based on misunderstanding my kindness and trust." Harry sat up abruptly, looking shocked. "Dad, we didn't think—" "I know what you think," I cut in, voice sharp as steel. "Every one of your schemes has been recorded. Every request, every expense, every action affecting me has evidence. I presented the receipts, invoices, bank records, and notarized contracts before them one by one. If you take any action to seize my assets or Alexa's rights, legal consequences will happen immediately. All these documents are certified, and I have witnesses." Mary trembled, stood up, trying to persuade Dad. "Please understand us. We just want to help." "Help," I repeated, my gaze piercing. "This is not help. This is a scheme to exploit. And today, you will face the truth." I paused, letting them feel every word, every detail. I opened the most important file papers related to the power of attorney they intended to use. Every word, every line was marked and annotated. "You plan to control me, but you forget the law cannot be manipulated. I have prepared everything to reverse all your efforts." Harry slumped down, his trembling hands gripping the armrest tightly. Mary gasped, no longer pretending. I clearly saw panic spreading. I continued, "Alexa will be protected. My assets will be placed into an education fund for her, securing her future without relying on you." I looked into Alexa's eyes. She smiled brightly. The trust in her gaze made me feel all the preparations were worth it. We will change," Harry stammered, his voice heavy. That's right. You need to prove your behavior and attitude over the next year. Any further actions will be monitored and have consequences. Any rights will only be considered if you truly prioritize Alexa's interests over your own financial gain." I closed the files and handed them to Catherine and James to sign the certification, everything legal, tight, and clear. Every plot, every plan was exposed, but still within legal boundaries, leaving no loopholes. Alexa ran up and hugged me tightly. "Grandpa, I know everything will be okay. Right. I will always protect you. At that moment, 3 generations together, though hearts ached from betrayal, still held on to family love and rightful protection. That afternoon, Harry and Mary left in silence. They realized the power of preparation, of evidence, and of a grandfather who would never let his grandchildren be exploited. I sat down, savoring the peace and knowing the next step was to secure an education fund for Alexa, ensuring she has a bright future despite the adults' schemes. Early Tuesday morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains onto my desk, piled high with legal documents, each page carefully organized. I picked up the phone and called James Miller, an old friend and bank vice president, to explain the situation. James, we need to reorganize the entire investment portfolio, focusing everything into a centralized management fund. I want to make sure everything is under my absolute control before anyone has the chance to manipulate it. His voice was warm, but more serious than usual. Norman, I understand, and I'll help you prepare all the necessary legal paperwork. I knew I held the advantage, but I still needed one final step to ensure all schemes were neutralized. The legal box, the educational trust fund for Alexa. I opened the file and marked each clause in red, making sure inheritance rights could only be exercised if Harry and Mary proved behavioral changes over a full year. My plan was divided into 3 main steps. Strengthen Alexa's education fund. I transferred all liquid assets and real estate into the trust, guaranteeing my daughter full access at age 21. All tuition, college, and scholarship expenses were fully accounted for. 2. Place all power of attorney documents under legal witnessing. Catherine Davis and James Miller would attest, ensuring any legal actions by Harry and Mary would face strict oversight. So, set behavioral change conditions for Harry and Mary. Only if they demonstrated real change and prioritized Alexa's interests over personal ambition would they gain access to her assets. That morning, Catherine arrived on time, carrying the seal and notarization book. James showed up shortly after, holding all the necessary bank documents. I continued preparing each document, checking every signature and timestamp, making sure there were no loopholes. Harry and Mary arrived at 10:05 confident but with troubled eyes. I smiled, maintaining a calm demeanor. "Please have a seat," I said. "Before signing anything, I need full transparency." I went through each document one by one, from transactions, 247 support funds, to car repair costs, tuition fees, and every other expense they had exploited. "Do you see what's going on?" My voice was low and firm. Mary and Harry fell silent. They realized every action had been documented with no room for deceit. I continued, "You plan to control me, but you forgot the law stands on the side of truth. Alexa will be protected. My assets will go into an education fund, and you will have to prove your behavior over the next year to even have a chance at access." Harry trembled, trying to explain. "Dad, we just wanted to help, I repeated coldly. "You plan to take over." "This isn't help. It's exploitation." I looked at Alexa, who stood close by, her eyes bright and full of trust. "You will be protected, Alexa. Grandpa will always be by your side." Mary tried to regain her composure, but the fake confidence was clearly gone. I opened the most important file, the power of attorney documents they intended to use. I laid each page before them, explaining every line and clause in detail. "If you try to carry out this scheme, legal consequences will follow immediately." Harry hung his head. Mary stayed silent. I paused, emphasizing every word. "Alexa will have full access to the assets when she turns 21. Your rights will only be considered if you demonstrate changed behavior and attitude over the next year. Today, all schemes are null and void." Catherine and James signed the certification, stamping all the documents. Everything was legal, secure, with no loopholes. Harry and Mary sat there, stunned, No more smiles, no confidence, only the clear awareness of consequences. Alexa ran up, hugging me, "Grandpa, I know everything will be okay." "That's right, sweetheart. I will always protect you," I replied with a gentle smile, my heart at peace. 3 generations together, through a storm of betrayal, yet still holding on to family and rightful interests. That morning, when Harry and Mary left in silence, I knew the legal plan was complete, and the next step would be to secure the education fund, ensuring Alexa has a bright future despite all the schemes. On Tuesday morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, Norman sat at his desk, feeling a mix of excitement and anticipation. Yesterday, all the legal documents were prepared, the power of attorney papers, the education fund contracts for Alexa, notarized certificates from Catherine and James. But it's all theoretical if Harry and Mary's every move isn't closely monitored. Norman carefully opened his computer, reviewing every email and note in his notebook. "They think I'll be overwhelmed when I see the papers. Actually, I've prepared everything in advance," he told himself. Around 9:00 a.m., the phone rang. James Miller arrived on time, carrying the bank documents. Norman carefully examined every detail, the power of attorney forms, the seals, and copies of the investment contracts. At every step, Norman maintained strict control, leaving no room for errors. Just minutes later, Harry and Mary appeared with confident smiles, as if everything was already in their hands. But their eyes revealed a hint of worry when they saw Norman calm and more decisive than usual. Norman began, "Please sit down. Before signing any documents, I want to make sure everything is transparent." He presented every page, every transaction, and every expense that had supported their family over the past 3 years. Expenses from tuition, car repairs to household bills were all recorded. Harry and Mary realized that all their schemes had been documented, and any wrongdoing would be legally controlled. "You plan to control me, but you forgot the law stands on the side of truth. Alexa will be protected, my assets will go into the education fund, and you must prove changed behavior for a year if you want access to the related assets," Norman said, his voice deep and firm. Mary tried to defend herself. "We just wanted to help." Norman's tone grew stern. "Help? You plan to take over." "This is not help. It's exploitation." He looked at Alexa, the little girl standing beside him, eyes shining with trust. "You will be protected. Alexa, he is always by your side." Next, Norman reviewed each power of attorney document that Harry and Mary planned to use. He laid them on the table, explaining each clause, timeline, and certification in detail. "If you try to carry out any scheme, legal consequences will happen immediately." Harry trembled, while Mary remained silent. They realized that all fraudulent actions had been documented, and they had no way out. Norman turned to Alexa gently. "Now you understand that I will protect you, right?" Alexa nodded, her eyes full of trust. "Yes, Grandpa. I know you are always with me." Norman continued guiding the process. Every signature must be witnessed by Catherine and James, and the education fund terms must be transparent and lawful. Every action of Harry and Mary will be closely monitored throughout the next year. After all documents were signed, sealed, and certified, Norman stood up, emphasizing, "You will have to prove changed behavior and attitude. Only when you put Alexa's interests above personal ambition will you have access to the related assets." Harry lowered his head. Mary said nothing. No more confident smiles, only deep awareness of legal consequences. Norman turned to Alexa. "Now we can focus on your future. No matter what Harry and Mary do, the education fund will protect you, and I will always be by your side." Alexa hugged him tightly, smiling happily. Norman felt the trust and safety fill the room, his heart light after tense days. He knew the next step was to monitor Harry and Mary, tracking their behavior, finances, and decisions to ensure no one could manipulate the fund or Alexa's rights. This was the crucial part to protect justice and fairness for the next generation. When Harry and Mary left, their eyes were filled with sadness, realizing every move they made was tightly controlled. Norman stood by the window, looking out at the yard, feeling peaceful. The legal plan was complete. The education fund was secure, and he was ready to supervise, ensuring Alexa's future would be free and safe. The next morning, Norman woke early, sunlight filtering through the curtains reminding him that today would be an important turning point. All legal documents were certified, the education fund established, but monitoring Harry and Mary was the real challenge ahead. He sat at the table, opened his laptop, and accessed bank reports, transaction histories, and real estate information. Every little detail was carefully recorded by him. They think I've been fooled, but actually, I've been preparing for a long time, Norman told himself. Before him was a sophisticated plan to monitor every move of Harry and Mary, document every negative action, and ensure Alexa's education fund was fully protected. Around 10 a.m., Harry called with a calm but tense voice. Dad, we want to discuss some family matters. We'll be there around 11. But today, we're working transparently. Everything must be clear. Norman observed carefully every gesture. Every word was memorized, preparing for the worst scenarios. He started the conversation before signing any documents. I need to be sure everything is transparent and legal. Any fraudulent behavior will be recorded and face legal consequences. This is an attempt at seizure. Protecting Alexa's education fund is the top priority. You must prove a change in behavior for 1 year if you want access to the related assets. No one has the right to harm her or this property. He explained the education fund's terms in detail. Every signature, every certification, and every condition was verified and strictly supervised. Harry and Mary realized their plan had been neutralized before they could act. Norman continued to monitor, tracking his children's financial behaviors, evaluating every decision, ensuring no one could manipulate the fund. He even scheduled weekly reports, documenting every transaction, every asset detail, and any signs of wrongdoing. You must put Alexa's happiness and future above personal ambitions. Otherwise, all rights will be suspended, Norman emphasized. Harry lowered his head. Mary remained silent. For the first time, their confident smiles disappeared. Norman knew that control was now entirely in his hands. Norman turned to Alexa, his voice warm. Now you understand that both your education fund and your future are safe, right? I know you're always by my side. He continued to instruct every action of Harry, and Mary would be closely monitored, and any changes in behavior and attitude would be recorded. Norman also planned to add legal measures if necessary, ensuring that the education fund would not be affected by any schemes from Alexa's parents. When Harry and Mary left the house, their eyes were empty, fully aware that all their plots had failed. Norman stood by the window, looking out at the garden, feeling a deep sense of peace. He had monitored everything closely. The education fund was protected, and Alexa had a free, safe future. This was the climax of the plan. Harry and Mary realized every fraudulent act was under control, and Norman was ready to handle the consequences if they continued their ambitions. The next chapter would be Chapter 8, Legal Consequences and the Family's Response, where every scheme would be exposed, and Harry and Mary would face the truth and the law. The next morning, Norman woke up feeling calm but highly focused. The battle wasn't over, but now he had full control. Ahead was the formalization of all the legal measures prepared Alexa's education fund, bank documents, property contracts, and all contingencies in case Harry or Mary tried to circumvent the law. Catherine Davis, the independent notary, arrived on time, placing all the documents on Norman's desk. Each paper was carefully checked, every signature verified, and all conditions were clear and lawful. Norman watched every gesture of Harry and Mary as they entered, their forced smiles and anxious eyes betraying their fear. "We just want to help, Dad." "Norman?" Mary began, her voice trembling but trying to sound confident. Norman stayed calm, his tone stern. "Help. What I see is a plot to seize property. If you want access to Alexa's education fund, you must prove behavioral change within 1 year. Any fraudulent act will be recorded and face legal consequences." Their long-held pride and confidence seemed to vanish in an instant. Norman was even more strict. Every financial transaction, every spending decision, every move related to Alexa's interests will be monitored. No one can manipulate this fund anymore. Alexa stood beside him, her eyes shining brightly, looking at her grandfather with complete trust. "You will always protect me, won't you?" Grandpa Norman smiled. "I'm always by your side. No one has the right to harm you or your fund." He continued explaining the terms of the education fund. Every signature, certification, and condition is verified and strictly supervised. Harry and Mary realized their plan had been nullified before they could act. Norman continued to oversee closely every move of the children, every bank transaction, every real estate document. He even scheduled weekly reports, recording every detail to ensure no loopholes remained. "You must put Alexa's happiness and future above personal ambitions. Otherwise, all your benefits will be suspended," Norman emphasized, his eyes cold but determined. Harry was silent, and Mary had no more excuses. For the first time, their confident smiles completely vanished. Norman knew that control was firmly in his hands, and they had no choice but to obey the rules. After all the paperwork was completed, Norman called Alexa over. "You understand that your education fund and future are safely protected, right? I know you're always by my side." He added that every action of Harry and Mary would be continuously monitored. Any fraudulent behavior would face legal consequences. Norman prepared all contingency plans to ensure the education fund was not affected by their schemes. When Harry and Mary left the house, their eyes were empty, fully aware that their plans had failed. Norman stood by the window, looking out at the garden with a deep sense of calm. The education fund was protected, Alexa's future was safe, and he had successfully overseen every step. Legal consequences were set. Harry and Mary understood that any fraud could be exposed. Norman was ready to handle any wrongdoing, and they had no option but to comply. These tense moments were not only a financial victory, but also a confirmation that Alexa's interests were always prioritized. Norman felt peace for the first time after many years of manipulation. He knows the next step will be to manage family relationships, but today, power and justice have been affirmed. The next chapter will be Chapter 9, Handling the Consequences and Planning the Future, where all plots are exposed, and Harry and Mary must face the reality they caused. After Harry and Mary left the house, Norman sat back at his desk, morning light streaming through the window onto the freshly notarized documents. All receipts, contracts, and legal terms were ready, ensuring Alexa's education fund was completely secure and her grandmother's rights were protected. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart slow to a calm rhythm after days of tension. But Norman understood his work was not finished. It wasn't just about protecting finances, but also guiding the family relationships moving forward. He needed to make sure Harry and Mary realized the consequences of their actions while steering them toward responsibility and change. He opened his laptop and reviewed all the transactions. 247 payments had been meticulously recorded over the past 3 years, from car repairs and tuition to household bills he had paid. Each document was marked, annotated, and organized chronologically to prove the injustices he had endured. This would serve as the legal basis to enforce any measures if Harry and Mary violated the agreement in the future. Next, Norman called James Miller, his longtime friend and the bank's deputy director, to discuss how to oversee Alexa's education fund and assets. They agreed on a quarterly reporting system covering all fund-related transactions, with James and Catherine Davis acting as legal witnesses. This ensured that all of Harry and Mary's actions would be transparent and tamper-proof. Then Norman turned to Alexa, who was sitting beside him. He gently explained that the education fund would guarantee every learning opportunity from college to graduate school, even supporting a startup if she wished. Alexa listened with bright eyes, feeling the safety and love from her grandfather. Her trust gave Norman greater peace of mind, knowing all his efforts were to protect his granddaughter's future. Meanwhile, Harry and Mary realized that all their schemes had failed. They had to face the reality that Alexa's financial rights were inviolable, and any attempt to manipulate them would have clear legal consequences. Norman let them realize their mistakes on their own. Without threats, the legal preparation and transparency alone were powerful enough to prevent any fraud. Norman spent the entire afternoon planning in detail how to monitor family relationships remotely every meeting. Every major expense was recorded and verified. He understood that personal decisions couldn't be completely stopped, but any wrongdoing could be detected and dealt with immediately. He also arranged a meeting with Harry and Mary next week, where they would be reminded of the conditions for accessing Alexa's education fund. They must prove real changes in behavior and prioritize the happiness, safety, and best interests of their granddaughter. Otherwise, all benefits would be suspended indefinitely. Norman emphasized that the change wasn't just superficial behavior, but genuine responsibility and attitude. That night, Norman spent time reviewing documents, photos, and journals, every detail of the abuse, the deliberate manipulation, and the love he had for his family. He realized that vigilance, legal knowledge, and thorough preparation were the keys to protecting loved ones, especially a child unable to protect herself. Before going to bed, Norman called Alexa back just to reassure her that everything would be handled fairly. He said, "You don't need to worry. I've protected you, and the education fund will ensure every opportunity for your future." Alexa smiled brightly, hugging her grandfather tightly. Their trust across 3 generations solidified. That night, Norman realized this fight wasn't just about protecting assets, but teaching the next generation lessons about honesty, responsibility, and the true value of family. Those who miscalculated now had to learn to take responsibility for their actions, and Norman would oversee this with the firmness and wisdom of someone who had faced countless challenges in 40 years of business. The next chapter would be Chapter 10. The conclusion and the assertion of power, where all schemes would end, the family would face the consequences, and Alexa would receive full protection for her future. The next morning, Norman woke up with a rare sense of calm. No more pressure, no more lead hanging over our heads. He looked out at the garden, where the morning sunlight filtered through Ellen's flowers, the gentle fragrance reminding him of peaceful days gone by. But today was no longer a day for reminiscing. Today was the day to end the schemes and set order within the family. At exactly 9:45, Catherine Davis arrived with her legal notarization kit. Everything was perfectly prepared: the signing book, official seals, and an organized list of evidence. Just 5 minutes later, James Miller knocked. Carrying detailed bank records of every transaction, Norman greeted them with a cold but confident smile. He was ready for anything. Exactly at 10:00, Harry and Mary showed up, holding files they thought would catch Norman off guard. But he had already read all their plans, fully understanding every detail of how they intended to manipulate legal power and assets. As they entered the room, Norman's steady, cold gaze, still in full control, made them hesitate. "Hello, kids," Norman said, his voice deep and firm. "We're going to handle the legal procedures today, but one thing must be clear. Alexa's education fund, my daughter's assets, and all related financial rights will be absolutely protected. Any action that violates the law will be dealt with immediately." Harry gasped. Mary's eyes widened. Norman's preparation was more thorough than they expected. They still believed they could manipulate him, but now every move had been turned around. Norman handed out copies of financial transactions, expenses, and the updated will where Alexa's education fund was fully secured. "You will have to prove genuine change within the next 12 months," Norman continued, his tone authoritative. "Only if you demonstrate that selfish behavior has ended will you gain access to any financial benefits. Any fraud will result in immediate suspension of your rights. This isn't punishment, but a necessary lesson." Harry tried to justify, but Norman stood firm. "I have witnessed too many times you put your personal interests above your granddaughter's. Now it's time for you to take responsibility. And Alexa will be protected." No strategy could surpass Norman's flawless legal preparation. Every word, every transaction, every document proved to everyone that honesty and responsibility were the only things that mattered. After the legal procedures were signed, notarized, and archived, Norman invited Alexa into the room. The little girl stepped forward, her eyes sparkling with joy, but still worried about the plans her parents once dreamed of. Norman knelt down, taking her small hand in his. "Alexa, everything is all right," he said gently. "I have protected your future. From now on, you won't have to worry about money or adults' wrong decisions. I will make sure you have every opportunity to learn and grow. Thank you, Grandpa. I know you will always be there for me." Norman looked at both Harry and Mary, his gaze stern yet full of authority. "This is your last chance to change your way of living. Put Alexa's happiness, safety, and future above all personal desires. Any selfishness will be detected and dealt with. Bye." Harry bowed his head. Mary dared not say a word. Even the legal witnesses felt the power of a man once exploited, now filled with clarity and determination. Finally, Norman turned to Alexa, held her hand, and said, "Learn to be honest and strong. Families can make mistakes, but you will always know how to stand firm and protect yourself.